Welcome to Question Time. Tonight we are in St Andrews. On tonight's panel, Màiri McAllan, a former advisor to the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, appointed as the Scottish Government's Minister for the Environment, Biodiversity and Land Reform within weeks of her election to Holyrood last year. Former MP, currently Chief Whip for the Scottish Conservatives at Holyrood and member of Douglas Ross's shadow cabinet, Stephen Kerr. Emily Thornberry, Shadow Foreign Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn, Shadow International Trade Secretary under Keir Starmer, and since the reshuffle last November, Shadow Attorney General for England and Wales. Iain Anderson, co-founder and executive chairman of the PR firm the Cicero Group, the first ever UK government LGBT business champion, and a former student at the university here in St Andrews. And author of crime novels whose sales topped 2 million, winner of numerous prizes, most recently from the Crime Writers Association, writer Christopher Brookmyre. Welcome to my panel, welcome to the audience here in St Andrews, and of course welcome to you at home as well. Do join in the conversation the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. Join in the debate. OK, our first question tonight is from Karen Murphy.
How long has Boris Johnson got left?
How long do you think, Karen?
I'm surprised he's still here.
Well, you'll understand that this is a very difficult thing for me as a lifelong Conservative to be sitting here and having to say words like, I think the leader of my party at the UK level should resign. But that is exactly what I am saying tonight. Because... and in this respect, I think that our party leader in Scotland, Douglas Ross, is right, because there need to be standards in public life. And what Douglas has shown is principle. And at the end of the day, those who are elected to public office have a great responsibility to discharge their responsibilities, but also to lead by example. And rather tragically, I think, and it is tragic, I think, in the case of our Prime Minister, that has not been the case. And I think Sajid Javid said today that these parties in Downing Street have damaged our democracy. And I think that is probably right. And that's something that needs to be resolved. So I think that in due course we will get the Sue Gray report. I think many members of Parliament are waiting for that report to come out, and then I expect that in due course the Prime Minister will be confronted with a vote of confidence, and I think from there on there's an inevitability to the fact that he will leave office. And why
aren't you waiting for the Sue Gray report?
Well, because I think that's a very good question. The Prime Minister himself stood at the dispatch box a week ago last Wednesday, and he actually said that he attended an event in the garden and in his own words. And I think that we will learn much more. I mean, I think we should understand what's going to be in the Sue Gray report in terms of the fact that I think some people are expecting this report to cast a judgment on the Prime Minister. I don't think that will be the case. I think it will set out some facts. But I think the Prime Minister has given us the most important fact.
OK, and you've made your mind up already?
And
all right.
Yes.
Emily.
The rules apply to everybody, whoever you are. That's the rule of law. And the Prime Minister and his friends in government have certainly more than given the impression that the rules don't apply to them. And the Prime Minister is more than prepared to just look you in the eye and lie to you again and again. You know, first of all, he says, I haven't broken the rules, there wasn't a party. And then he says, there wasn't a party. And then he says, well, if there was a party, nobody told me that it was against the rules, and so on, and so on, and so on. It's nonsense. And up and down the country, people are getting prosecuted for things like this. People are getting brought before the magistrates and prosecuted for turning up with a get-well card or a birthday card and not realising they were arriving at a party, but getting prosecuted anyway. The rules should apply to everyone equally. Just think how difficult it is for magistrates at the moment applying these rules, and yet it doesn't seem to apply to the government. We don't need to have Sue Gray's review, I don't think. I don't think the Prime Minister needs to have it either. He knows he broke the rules. He knows that they used to have wine Fridays. He knows what was going on, and he knows that their attitude was the rules didn't apply to them. And it is insulting to us that he doesn't just show a little modicum of humanity and humility and just go.
OK, there's a lot of hands up. Let's work our way around the audience. Yes, the woman there in the red top.
Yeah, the recent easing of restrictions, I think, is really concerning. Do you think this is a political manoeuvre to ease pressure on Boris?
I mean, they're easing in Scotland as well. The woman here with the blonde hair, yes.
Sorry, what does Boris actually feel he has still got left to give? If he got through this, what has he got to give?
Exactly.
I mean, it's a little bit of an embarrassment, really, isn't he?
Well,
a lot.
well, I think setting what we're talking about aside for a minute, let's be frank. The government, on the big issues during this pandemic, have got things right. I mean, the rollout of the vaccination programme, that is an astonishing success.
What about before the rollout? So that the highest death toll in Europe, one of the highest death tolls in the world. Only 3 months ago, an all-party Common Select Committee called it one of the biggest public health failures in our history.
But nevertheless, when it came to the preparations that were necessary in order for us to have this enormous vaccination programme, the UK government, led by the Prime Minister, got that right. They've got it right on the antiviral medicines. They've got it right on the furlough. They've got it right on a lot of stuff that's got us to the point where we are now going to become one of the freer nations in Europe in terms of restrictions.
OK, let's hear a bit more from her. The woman there in the blue shirt.
When my husband was in hospital with COVID, one of the nurses went to the next village to buy an orange and she was stopped and fined.
She was fined for buying an orange?
She was fined for going to the next village.
Yeah, travel.
So what do you think should happen to Boris Johnson?
I think he should be gone ages ago.
All right. The woman there, yes, with the dark hair, with your hand up. Yes, yes, you.
Yeah, although the questions about Boris Johnson, actually, there are wider issues within Whitehall, other government departments, and with senior civil servants. And actually, I'm a public health consultant, and I was responsible for embedding and ensuring that all that guidance was put in place. I worked with the police to identify where there were, areas where the public weren't adhering to the rules. And I'm just quite disgusted that the head of the COVID task force, who was responsible for implementing these guidelines, herself could not even adhere to the guidance that she was producing.
OK. Iain?
Yeah.
Should he go? When should he go?
So, look, this has become a total political circus. I mean, it's become such a total political circus that the Scottish Conservatives are saying that their own Prime Minister should go. That's how topsy-turvy all of this has completely become. Look, earlier this week, we saw... I mean, I'm a business guy, and we saw an example where the chief executive of Credit Suisse resigned. Mm-hmm. Yeah? He resigned after there had been an investigation. Now, this is where I take issue where Stephen and Emily have been so far. Sue Gray is doing this investigation. She's looking at what happened. At the moment, what we're dealing with, Fiona, is lots of headlines, lots of speeches, lots and lots of political froth. We've heard, just day after day after day of this political maelstrom, when actually, what we really should be focusing on is climbing out of this pandemic, is what we're going to do in terms of economy. So,
do you think that no decision should be taken before the report?
So I think...
Wait for the Sue Gray report.
I think we need to just calm it down, wait for what Sue Gray has to say. If she exonerates the Prime Minister, then to directly answer that lady's question, I do think he should continue and go on. Clearly, if we've been misled, if there is evidence that has not been transparent, then people have decisions to make. Conservative MPs have decisions to make. But I think we need to have due process here, and we need to wait to see what Sue Gray has to say.
Sue Gray is not due process. I mean, listen, she's highly respected. I don't mean anything I say to undermine her credibility and her standing. But she is, in the end, a civil servant employed by the Prime Minister. She can't tell the Prime Minister that he has to leave. He's the only one who can decide that he should resign. She's not a retired High Court judge. This is not an independent inquiry. You know, she doesn't have the power to force, for example, civil servants to give up their private phone so that she can see their WhatsApp messages, for example. And we hear that instructions have been given out by senior people at Number 10 to junior people saying they need to clean up their phones. I mean, all of these things are very worrying. I am quite sure that she will produce an excellent report and she will do everything she can with the evidence that is put before her, but she will not be drawing conclusions, I don't imagine, because that really isn't her job. You know, so just be careful. I mean, you know, and in any event,
Emily, I think
we already have from the Prime Minister.
Before we get to the report, let's get the report. Before everybody rushes to judgment.
The report is just going to set out the facts as she knows them and as she has been allowed to give access to them. But we have already heard the Prime Minister say that he turned up to a non-party for 25 minutes where there was drink and you know, nibbles on tables and lots of people together and so on, and somehow or other that wasn't a party. We've all heard it, and to be quite honest, it is impossible for people not to draw a conclusion from that.
Could I just come in there and say, look, I understand why we are discussing this, but here we are again. There is a cost of living crisis ongoing in the real world. And we're discussing the intricacies between whether someone knew about a party, wasn't told about the rules, did lie, didn't lie, misled Parliament. Like Karen, I am completely shocked that the man is still in position. I have long had little faith in Westminster as an institution through which due process could be done. That is increasingly the case. It is becoming a circus. People seem more concerned with political games and hanging on to their own jobs than, frankly, doing what is right in the eyes of the people. And look, we just need to think back to that time in May 2020, a time we are trying all to forget, characterised by fear and anxiety and loss on a national scale. And at the same time, we were being let down flagrantly and frequently by the people who were supposed to set the rules. He should go. And frankly, I hope he's the last Tory Prime Minister that Scotland has to get rid of.
Yes, I'll come to you in a minute. There's a woman there in the green and yellow, yes.
My question is for Stephen. Throughout the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of rule breaking from Westminster, Matt Hancock, Dominic Cummings. Why is it only now that the Scottish Tories are saying enough is enough, and it's not been unacceptable until now?
Well,
I'll come back to you in a minute, Stephen, if I may. Yes, the man back there in the pink shirt.
Yes, I think there's enough been admitted already, including an apology to the Queen. You know, we're not actually needing the review. Yeah. The second thing I would say is, you know, how many more bullets does Dominic Cummings have? You know, how long is this going to go on? You know, so there is two sides to it.
Is there anyone here who wants to speak up for Boris Johnson? OK, well, so there's plenty of... oh, yes, come on. No! What, you do want to, but you don't dare, or you don't want to? You don't want to, OK. Because obviously there are Conservative voters here, but no one so far. Chris?
Well, I think the gentleman makes a good point with the question of what's still to come out. Because if I was to use a crime fiction allusion, Boris Johnson always makes me think of Rollo Tomasi in LA Confidential, the man who gets away with it. Because he is someone who, his entire career, he has never faced adverse consequences for bad behaviour. He's never faced adverse consequences for his dishonesty. A couple of times. He has been sacked and then failed upwards. He was sacked for making up quotes at the Times, and then he becomes bureau chief in Brussels for the Telegraph, where he proceeds to make up lies about the EU. And that's not my spin on it. That was his take. He boasted that he would make up lies about what was going on in the EU, and he was delighted to see that Eurosceptic MPs would be repeating these lies in Parliament a couple of days later. And it was those lies were actually part of the populist Eurosceptic mythology that drove us to leave the EU. You know, his lies have had a toll on us for 25 years. But as a crime writer, one of the things you think about is criminal behaviour and the psychology of it. Boris Johnson is someone who has, because he hasn't faced adverse consequences, I think he's reached the stage where he starts to forget that what he's doing is wrong. And certainly the lies he has told over this are so laughably unconvincing that I don't think he is someone who is talented in constructing his fables. I think he says what he needs to get out of the next 5 minutes. And that's why it's so unconvincing. That's why even his own party are not convinced. His own party are already preparing to have a leadership contest because they know he is now a liability.
Stephen, I'll let you come back in. Is it a bit embarrassing for you? Because obviously you're calling for Boris Johnson to resign now, but you supported him previously.
I've been a Conservative since I was a teenager. I was a young Conservative. And so it's very uncomfortable. It's painful to have to be engaged in the discussion. And I will not join in with this general character assassination that I'm hearing from other panellists, because I think that is just not right. I think we've got to give credit to the Prime Minister for the things that he's gotten right. But on this occasion, clearly, by his own words, he has not got it right.
Could I just say again, though, on the question of someone who doesn't face consequences, when you don't face consequences, you don't learn from your mistakes. And what we've seen during the pandemic was that Boris Johnson kept repeating the same mistakes because he's not used to adapting his course, because, again, he is not punished.
Anyone who watched that painful interview that we saw on Tuesday is seeing a man who is facing consequences. So I don't accept that either. But
Steve,
I also do
we're
want
not
to
going to
reply
feel sympathy for him here. I think that's a really important point, Chris. You know, that idea of not having had to face the consequences of your actions, compare that with how the Conservative Party have, for example, treated the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society, including those living with disabilities, through their welfare reforms and a punitive sanctioning regime. Just compare and contrast the experiences of life there.
Okay.
Can I answer the question that was raised earlier? Because it's an important point.
In about 5 seconds, I must move on, Stephen, and I've given you a lot of time.
Douglas Ross has consistently adhered to the standard that those in public office should keep the rules when they're making the rules. That is why he, on principle, resigned from the government over the case of Dominic Cummings' so-called eye-test journey to Barnard Castle. So Douglas Ross has been consistent. The Scottish Conservatives have been consistent in respect to this. Those who make the law must abide by the law. Those who make the rules must abide by the rules.
Let's take another question now from Sheila Lafferty.
By calling the Scottish Tory leader a lightweight, did the government show its contempt for the people of Scotland, and therefore should the Scottish Conservative Party now drop "an unionist" from its title?
So this is a reference to Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is calling Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, a lightweight. The Prime Minister was offered the opportunity yesterday in an interview to repudiate that description. He, in the end, he didn't exactly do that. He chose to answer in a different way. Màiri.
So I think it's a really good question, Sheena, and there's 2 points that I would say. First of all is the fact that Douglas Ross was an enthusiastic supporter of Boris Johnson, you know, supporting him to the leadership, when I think most of us could see that he was singularly unfit to fulfil the position of Prime Minister. And actually for that, I think he was the people of Scotland and across the UK an apology. But the second point about having been called a lightweight, frankly, I think he's getting a taste of the disdain with which we've long known a lot of politicians in London hold Scotland. And, yeah, I hope that he will reflect...
Conservative and Labour?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there is a tendency to feel that way about the governments in each of the countries. But, look, I'm not just theorising here. We saw it in the way that Jacob Rees-Mogg described his colleague. And I think it's pretty telling, actually, about the way that they feel about Scotland.
Iain?
So Jacob Rees-Mogg was wrong. It's back to this point I was making earlier about the fact that this is just suddenly political theatre rather than political reality, when actually there's so many more important things that we need to be getting on with and discussing. I disagree with Jacob Rees-Mogg fundamentally. I don't think Douglas Ross is a lightweight at all. I think, as Stephen has said, he has, you know, he's stuck his neck out you know, at the moment he really is sticking his neck out. I tend to disagree with him on this particular judgment call, but I mean, you can't say he doesn't have political courage. Jacob Rees-Mogg was wrong. He shouldn't have said it, and he should apologise. All right. The man here in the front.
I think that the Scottish Tories have unanimously decided that they'd withdraw support for Boris Johnson. We need 54 other MPs from Westminster to do the same to get this election started. But it's interesting that Jacob Rees-Mogg accuses the leader of the Scottish Tory party of being lightweight. Now, he's just part of the Brexit cabal that took over the Tory party in the same way that Jeremy Corbyn and Momentum took over the Labour Party a few years ago. And we're going to get back to one nation Toryism, and we're going to get back, I think with Keir Starmer, we're going to get back to a kind of normal Labour Party as well. OK. Man in the pink shirt.
I just think that people like Rees-Mogg, Dominic Cummings, they just get far too much airtime at the moment. No one in Scotland's interested in what they have to say. It is completely disrespectful and out of order what he said, but you know, he lounges around with his feet up on the benches in the Commons. He's a joke, the guy. So don't pay much attention to him.
Could I just say that I think there's quite a degree of projection by Jacob Rees-Mogg calling Douglas Ross a lightweight, given that I think even Boris Johnson has entrusted Jacob Rees-Mogg with nothing more important than a role to do with etiquette and protocol, like he's some kind of steampunk C-3PO. But he was profoundly disrespectful of Douglas Ross. Now, I won't pretend I'm a fan of Douglas Ross, especially some of the offside decisions he gave against St Mirren down here.
Okay, let's not get into that, otherwise we'll be here all night.
His office deserves some respect, and Jacob Rees-Mogg disrespected the office of the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, and that's going to be a very hard thing for that party to walk back.
And there's an irony now, isn't there, that, you know, I think the Scottish Conservatives have done the right thing. I think it's the only thing that they could do in the circumstances. But if Boris doesn't go, come May, Stephen and his colleagues will be asking us, to back the Tories and Boris Johnson in the May elections. So I really fail to see how they're going to reconcile that.
The May elections are for local government. They're for your local councillor. And I think conflating this issue with these May elections is a great mistake. But
let's talk about these comments then by Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes.
The Prime Minister was given the chance to gainsay it yesterday and did not. Is Boris Johnson damaging the union?
The union, the future of the United Kingdom, is much greater than the career of any one politician.
Do you think he's damaging it right now?
I don't believe that Boris Johnson is damaging the union as such, but I do think that I want to say something very direct about Douglas.
There's a bit of laughter to your response there. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm trying to address the issue of the fact that there is no one politician, there is no one career in politics that's greater in importance, that overshadows the future of the United Kingdom and Scotland's place in the United Kingdom. And it's pretty typical of nationalists generally, that they will channel every single issue that comes along as a constitutional issue. This is not... The issue we're discussing tonight is not a constitutional issue. The office of leader of the Scottish Conservatives is certainly not a lightweight office. And I have had the privilege of sitting beside Douglas Ross in the House of Commons when I was an MP, and I have the privilege of sitting beside him in Holyrood now. He may be many things in respect to his assistant refereeing and all the rest of it, but I'll tell you this, he ain't any kind of a lightweight politician. He's a substantial, principled person who I greatly admire, frankly, and fully support as the leader of the Scottish Conservatives.
And as a principled man, as you describe, will he have to resign if Boris Johnson does not resign?
No, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives has his own mandate from the membership of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, and so that is not in the equation whatsoever. Douglas Ross remains the leader of the Scottish Conservatives.
The man there in the dark shirt, yes.
Every time you watch Parliament, whenever the SNP stand up, the Tories and Labour all walk out. As a Scotsman, can you feel anything other than contempt? I mean, it's just awful behaviour. They don't even the decency for the front bench people to stay and listen. I know it might bore them to death,
They don't all walk out.
Yes, they do. If you watch, they leave 2 or something. I mean, it is really an act of physical contempt.
OK. Woman there in the white shirt.
It just feels very disappointing that in a time where we're having to deal with so many really important issues that the politicians who we've entrusted to lead our country have basically resorted to sort of childish name-calling. And it's that bothers me. And how do you defend that, and how do you get on board with the fact that your party is behaving in that kind of fashion?
Right.
Well, can I say that I completely agree. This whole matter is a complete deflection. I agree that our priority, our focus should be on the recovery from the pandemic.
All right. You've taken your hand down, sir. Did you? Yes, there you go. Yes, the man there.
So, Stephen, a question for you. If your leader is alleged to be a lightweight politician, how come he's made a heavyweight decision not to invite the Prime Minister to the Tory conference in Scotland?
Well, can I respond to that straight away? So that is not true. There has been no discussion about any of that.
OK,
so that, let me say that's not
so
true.
he may yet come.
But he's not a lightweight politician when he's
you've
making
made that
such
point.
principled decisions.
You've made that point. Thank you. Emily.
I just want to carry on hearing this extraordinary drama that's going on here. It's an absolute soap opera, isn't it? But on a serious point, so, I mean, let's be clear about this. The Conservative Party are not just insulting the leader of the Conservatives in Scotland. You may also have heard them saying that the Red Wall MPs are non-entities. So that's an insult to people to these representatives of people in the north of England. We have seen a civil war going on at the moment in the Conservative Party, where it seems to be OK to bully and blackmail MPs. You know, if you think about what has been said about the way in which the MP for Bury South was being treated, that's an insult to the people of Bury South as well. You know, this is not just about Scotland. This is about a civil war in the Tory party and a party that is currently the government of the whole of the UK, and they are so preoccupied with fighting themselves and trying to save the Prime Minister that it's right. They are not concentrating on recovery from the pandemic. They're not concentrating on the cost of living crisis. They have no plan for those. They have no plan for how we're going to deal with the cost of living crisis. And frankly, they don't have any bandwidth to even be able to think about it, because they're spending so much time, with respect, fighting one another. Yeah. That's what's going on.
OK. We are going to move off this subject, but before we do, I just want to tell you where we are going to be next week. We're going to be in Morecambe. Who knows what will have happened by then? We may even have the Sue Gray report. Anyway, the week after that, we will be in London. And I mentioned last week that we're looking for people to come and be part of our audience who are unvaccinated. We know that there's a relatively high proportion in London, and there are many different reasons why people have chosen not to get the vaccine. We'd be interested to explore some of those issues. So if you are someone who has made that decision not to be vaccinated, we'd very much like to hear from you. I think it's an important debate. You can go to the Question Time website and you can follow the link there. So Morecambe next week, London the week after that. OK, let's take another question now from Jodie Shuttlewood.
Given the latest inflation figures, what measures should we immediately adopt to protect the living standards of those most vulnerable in our society?
So, Emily, we've heard you say you don't think the government's got any plans. What are Labour's plans?
So what we should do is, given that the government has been having a bit of a windfall on VAT because of the way in which energy prices have gone up, we should have a time where we simply cut VAT. That will give all families about £200 a year. We need to then have a focused amount of money on the poorest, on the squeezed middle, on the elderly, whereby we help them with their bills as well. And that's what Labour's costed plan is about, and we're going to get that by having a windfall tax on the energy companies, who themselves as well are making a great deal of money at the moment. So
there's also a lot of energy companies going bust.
But they're not the creators of the energy. They're simply, the ones who sell it.
Yes.
So I'm talking about more upstream than that. So that's the point, is that you go upstream where they're making the money, you get a windfall tax from them, and then you start redistributing in the short term, and you make sure that that happens. Now, I think helping with the energy cost would be a huge help. We would also... if we were in power, we would say that the Tories should not be introducing the increase in taxes, which they're going to do in the spring as well. So at the same time as the energy price is going up by 50% for most households, we're also going to have an increase in taxes. Now, how that can make any sense, I simply don't know. So there's two things for starters. Chris?
I feel this is going to require very broad measures and a lot of deep thinking. And what this reminds me of is that after the financial crash of 2010, once again, we're going to be faced with a very big economic bill for the pandemic. And I think the measures taken then, when the attempt to balance the books and the analogies of balancing the books like it was a household budget, were disastrous because they were used as the excuse for austerity policies. And those austerity policies ended up driving populist politics leading to Brexit. So I think what's crucial is that this time we don't place the greatest burden on the most vulnerable people in society, which is what happened under Cameron and Osborne.
All right. Man there, in the shirt in the middle of the row. Yes, you, sir.
Yeah, Oxfam and others recently have highlighted the glaring, soaring wealth of the richest in society. Meantime, I'm so glad that we're talking about real issues because, as somebody in Scotland, we have been talking about dysfunctional leadership and cross-border fighting. So it's really nice to be talking about something that actually matters to people in Scotland. Yeah. And what would you say about dealing with extreme wealth when we've got people during the pandemic who've been increasingly isolated, vulnerable, and inequalities have grown immensely?
Yeah. I take your point about talking about real issues. The reason we started on Boris Johnson is so many of you asked about it. So there we are. Yes, the man there in the check shirt.
When we have so many natural resources right on our doorstep, why are we shipping in at 450p a therm gas and oil from the Gulf of Mexico? It just doesn't make sense. Why does the Scottish Government not support the oil and gas industry?
I'll come back to you in a minute, Mary. Yes, the man there.
On the point of cost of living hitting the poorest, Jack Monroe today on Twitter highlighted the fact that the way that we calculate cost of living increases is grossly unfair and tipped massively towards the wealthier end of the spectrum. A 5% cost of living increase is simply an average. If you look at some basic goods on the shelf, in just the past year, some of those have increased by over 150%. This is kind of hitting the very poorest in society the hardest. So surely one of the first things that we can do to help kind of mitigate the prices of cost of living is to change the way that we calculate those. And rather than looking at kind of like £10 ready meals that have stayed the same for a decade, we should be looking at the basic price of goods like pasta and flour and kind of fruit and veg for the people who need it most in our society.
Can I just ask, is anyone here in the audience worried about how rising prices, we've got inflation now at 5.4%, how that is going to affect them in the year to come? Yes, you stuck your hand up there in the pink shirt, yes.
I'm a domestic energy assessor, and every day I'm in people's houses trying to advise on how best to insulate or heat their homes affordably. And I have to say, every day I'm hearing about people's fuel bills having doubled, you know, and for those that haven't, that hasn't yet, that's because your fixed term agreement hasn't run out. It's coming. And I think over the decades, we've had flip-flopping of policies, badly written policies. Emily Thornberry, your party, going back to the feed-in tariff with solar panels, you know, the bulk of the money went to wealthy individuals, and it ran out real quick.
That's because the Conservatives won the election.
And that policy ended. And then going on to the sort of Conservative and Lib Dem agreement, you know, the Green Deal came and went. And at the SNP, we're still waiting to hear about this energy company that Nicola was going to set up. And here we are, 5 years on, not a jot. You know, so everybody's got a responsibility. That is your job. You're paid to represent the people of the nation. And all we're seeing is just a sort of tit-for-tat chat.
What did happen to that energy company, Mary?
So actually, today we have Michael Matheson, the Net Zero Secretary, launched the first stage of our consultation for our energy agency. Now, the commitment to...
But it's taken 5 years to get to that point.
But that's not the same thing.
Well, I was just about to go on to say, so our initial commitment, our hope was to create a national energy company. However, the volatility in the energy market just now, and indeed the powers that, energy is a reserved power, make that very difficult, if not impossible, to proceed with. So what we have launched today is an agency which is going to help us drive forward our policy to decarbonise 1 million homes in Scotland by 2030. Can I just pick up on the cost of living point, Fiona, because people have shown a real understanding and a consciousness here about what Chris was saying about the context that this is happening in. So we have had 10 years of austerity, cutting public services to the bone, welfare reform punishing the most vulnerable in our society. We've had a hard Brexit pursued in the middle of a pandemic, and all the while we've had a UK government lining their chums' pockets with eye-watering sums of public money.
And of course, council tax is going to go up in Scotland now because the Scottish Government's just lifted the cap on it.
Well, that's up to councils. That's up to councils. We've given them the flexibility.
But you could have kept the cap in place.
We've kept the cap in place for...
And the £371 million cut in the money that's sent from the Scottish Government to councils.
Well, look, we had a 5.2% cut
increase
from our budget from UK Government. Scotland has to balance its budget. We don't have borrowing powers. That's the very difficult task that Kate Forbes has to oversee. But we have still managed to deliver a draft budget which rises to the challenge of recovery in our NHS post-pandemic and indeed longer-term challenges like climate change. And
but if you kept the cap on council tax, then that wouldn't be passed on to the people in their homes.
Councils
could struggle to pay their energy bills.
Councils asked for the flexibility as regards the council tax. But if I can just give you one example of one thing that you asked for concrete examples. We have introduced, since some social security powers were devolved, 11 new benefits in Scotland, 7 of which are only available in Scotland. Now, one of them is the Scottish Child Payment, which is £10 a week to every child and every eligible child, and we will raise that to £20 from April. That has been described by anti-poverty campaigners as a game changer. But at the same time, we have one hand tied behind our back because the UK Government have taken £20 a week out of universal credit. That is the challenge we're facing, but the SNP are determined to keep trying to lift people out of poverty in this country.
Steve.
Well, this is what the SNP do. They constantly launch initiatives, they constantly have consultations, and they don't actually do anything. But when they do something, it's something like cutting £371 million out of councils. Funding to councils. And that is why all of the council leaders across Scotland, all 32 councils, including SNP members, are howling in protest, and quite rightly too. But the SNP government just ignore all of that. But there is a...
Can I just say this, because I just want to put this in just to kind of get the full kind of picture here. Because isn't it right that, and please tell me if I got this wrong, but isn't it right that central government cut the funding to the Scottish Government by about 100 million, and then the Scottish Government quadrupled those cuts and passed them on to local government? I mean, isn't that actually what happened?
What we've got is the largest block grant since devolution coming to the Scottish Government, the largest increase in the block grant from central government since devolution. And what the SNP do is they set their political priorities, and their political priorities do not include supporting the services that are provided by local government. And,
sorry, I just need to come in here. First of all, I think that...
Let him finish, and I'll let you...
When it comes to energy bills, the UK government announced a measure at the end of last year to spend £500 million targeting support to the most vulnerable people in our society. £41 million of that came to the Scottish Government, and thus far the Scottish Government have done nothing to disperse that money to the most vulnerable people in Scotland.
OK,
so it's all words.
Let's let Màiri answer that.
Blah, I'm afraid.
Briefly, Màiri, because I need to get round
Yeah,
the rest
no, absolutely. First of all, I just think that maybe Emily's Scotland brief needs to be updated a little bit before she comes on a Scottish programme.
That's what I'm asking. Again. I mean, that's what I was told.
That's
what I was told.
OK, fair enough.
Is that you guys have had cuts from central government, but frankly, the cuts you've passed on to local government are much greater than that. So when the councils complain and say we want to have the cap lifted, of course you've got to let them.
We have protected the local government budget in some of the most challenging fiscal circumstances that we've ever faced, and we've given flexibility to councils as regards council tax, as was asked for.
Iain.
Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, lots and lots and lots of politics, no real solutions. That's what frustrates me about what we've just been listening to, I'm afraid, with our political friends for the last 3 or 4 minutes. You're absolutely right, sir. This question is urgent and it's important. there needs to be a economic package that supports people through what is already an incredibly difficult period. You can see prices going up when you're in the shops. You can see the cost of your shopping basket going up, and we can see in 2-3 months' time energy bills going up. So, look, we need a comprehensive economic package. It's got to be the top priority for the Chancellor, for the Scottish Finance Secretary. Let's just get out of the statistics rabble and get on with it. I'm really delighted, though, that we're in St Andrews tonight, because I know the university here is doing a heck of a lot of work around renewables and the research and investment that is going into the future economy right here in Fife is going to stand us in good stead.
And you're not just saying that because you're a non-executive director of the university.
Well, I thought it would be rude not to. And there are, of course,
let's hear a bit. Look, there's lots of hands up. Let's hear from yes, the woman there in the purple scarf.
We've talked about energy and we're talking about the cost of living. What I find appalling is the mismanagement of taxpayers' money. This week on Monday it was announced that the Treasury was going to write off 4.2 billion of fraud from COVID loans. That's of the 5.8 billion of COVID fraud. They've recovered 500 million. They think they'll get another billion back in the next year at a cost to us of 100 million. That's what it's going to cost us, and they're going to write off 4.3 billion. That is 10% of the Scottish Block grant for next year. That is almost the same amount as the 5 billion that the Secretary of Health announced was being given to the National Health Service on its COVID recovery path. And we're going to write it off.
The woman there in the black and white. The woman in the black and white. No, the woman in the black and white top. Just a bit further forward. That's it.
In light of all the austerity measures, the price caps and the way that we are now going back to Victorian times, where children are going to have to be either warm or fed in their bellies, is it not the wrong time for MPs to have their wages increased by another £2,500?
Right. And the woman behind you, yeah.
Sorry. On the increase in the cost of living, I'm really concerned with the increase in rail prices due to happen in March. I think rail prices are criminal in the UK, and the fact that the most sustainable mode of transport is also the most expensive doesn't make any sense to me. As someone that regularly takes like a 5-hour-long train to get to university, I feel like I'm spending a small fortune on trains every month. And I just think I love trains and I'll always choose to take the trains over flying. But I can't blame anyone for taking the cheaper route when it costs a fraction of the price at the expense of the environment.
And the man behind you there, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I've, like everyone else, I've seen the projected cost in energy bills and it's pretty horrific. What I'm wondering is this a short, sharp jolt, or in this new, hopefully post-COVID, post-Brexit, tensions with Russia and in Eastern Europe, is this sort of inflationary world going to be the new normal, or is this just a short-term thing that will hopefully pass soon?
All right, and I'll take one final point, yes, from the man in the check shirt there, yeah.
Could I just ask, what is it that the Scottish MSPs are actually doing? Because everything is Westminster's fault. Okay, we've had devolution, which was going to be this wonderful thing in Scotland and elsewhere, and we're no further forward. We don't have any improvements, you know, and there just seems to be millions and billions of pounds that gets wasted, and you know, there's no improvement in poverty. You know, we have food banks. I mean, this is ridiculous in the 21st century in Scotland. Absolutely scandalous. You know, and why is it that they cannot come up with the solutions?
And who are you blaming for that? Are you blaming the government of Westminster, or are you blaming the government here in Holyrood?
Well, it's a bit of both, but in reality, why is it that we have a devolved government that is got all of this money given from the UK government, and they cannot seem to solve any of these problems? Suicide, drugs, addictions, you know, the health, the roads, the transport, everything. It just, what is it? I mean, you just need to go out on the roads around here, and I mean, you could play 18 holes going down the street at Abbey Walk. Yeah. You know, I mean, you don't have to go onto the old course for that.
Sorry.
You know, I mean, the local garages around here must be rubbing their hands in terms of repairs to cars and everything. You know, it's absolutely shocking. What are they actually doing? I mean, I'm not just blaming the SNP for this. At the end of the day, there's been a number of colours that's been in devolved Scotland, but nothing is improving, and us as taxpayers are paying them a fortune. So what are they actually earning their money?
So what are you doing to earn your money, Màiri?
So can I just come in on that? Well, Scottish ministers' salaries have been frozen for over a decade. So I think someone mentioned...
I want you to earn your money.
No, and I'm going to come on to that. First of all, the point that you say, you know, money given to us, it's not given to us. It's sent down in our taxes and it comes back up through the Barnett formula. That's just the way that the Constitution works. Let me give you an example of what we're doing, and I'll take it from a child born in Scotland today, or indeed someone that we would welcome from around the world. When they're born, they will have a baby box waiting for them with essentials for the first 6 months of life. By the time they're 2, they could be entitled to...
He's asking why.
Essentials for a child.
Well, listen, my mum and dad didn't have that, and I grew up okay. I didn't have that.
Well, maybe you were fortunate. Maybe you were fortunate, but they will have... Sorry, I need to answer the question.
Worked hard.
Okay. They could have 1,140 hours of funded childcare. By the time they go to primary school, they will have a free school meal, support with music and art tuition, support with school trips. When they go to high school, they will have greater chance than ever before of getting a higher pass and an advanced higher pass. Someone mentioned public transport. We've just introduced free bus travel for under 22s to allow them...
But it isn't free.
It's
we
funded.
Have to pay for it.
Exactly, it's funded.
Nothing is free.
Should they decide...
We have to pay for it.
Should they decide they want to go to university, they will do so based on their ability to learn and not on their ability to pay. And I think that's an apt point to make in St Andrews.
This is the reality. This is the reality of Scottish politics, that we've had one party in power for 15 years, and all the things that gentleman says is absolutely true. What people care about in Scotland, as they do, I think, throughout the whole of the United Kingdom, is the quality of their lives. They care about the quality of the roads outside they drive on. They care about things like the quality of the education that's been delivered, for example, in Scotland schools, which has deteriorated under the watch of the SNP.
You can say that until you're blue in the face. It doesn't make it true.
It was her defining mission. And on top of all of this, we pay more tax in Scotland than any other part of the United Kingdom.
That's just not true.
So it's not a lack of money that the SNP have, it's a lack of focus. Because as we've heard tonight repeatedly, every issue is channeled through the prism of separatism. We have a First Minister who wakes up every morning with a single agenda item. What can I do today on any issue that I'm dealing with that will exacerbate, move forward her lifetime dream of breaking up the United Kingdom?
What's the baby box got to do with the Constitution?
OK, what I'm going to stop now is the backwards and forwards and trading statistics. I'm not sure that's answering your question. I think we should just take this forward. So let me take another question, which is from Alexander Walker.
Should there be a cap on the number of holiday homes and student flats in areas such as St Andrews to preserve local communities?
So that's getting a round of applause. Why are you so exercised about it?
I just think there's a danger it's going too far one way, and there's not enough accommodation for local people to buy or afford.
And is that a problem for you specifically?
No.
OK. Chris?
This is definitely not an area that I'm well versed in, but certainly we're seeing a very volatile economy to do with housing, and one of the causes of that is the sort of Airbnb culture, and more people buying properties to not just to rent them out, but to rent them out short term. And I know that has had a massive deleterious effect on housing in Edinburgh.
So Edinburgh's got the greatest number of Airbnbs after London.
Mm-hmm. And so it's one of these areas it's always difficult for governments to start to legislate something that's an effect of free market policies. But perhaps they're going to have to intervene if it becomes difficult for people to actually find somewhere to live close to where they work.
So, Iain, this is not just a problem with Scotland, it's a problem for many places across the UK. You've got the Welsh Government's consulting on plans to give councils the power to limit second homes and holiday lets. You've got places in the south of England where, I mean, a survey in Devon found there were villages where 95% of properties were second homes. What can actually be done about it?
Yeah, I mean, it is very, very difficult to, you know, your earlier point about currently a free market in housing. So what I'm not in favour of is, you know, a market intervention.
A cap, which is what the question is.
Yeah, no, I'm not in favour of a market intervention. I just sort of say that up front. However, I do think this is where local planning policies need to be more sensitive. So, you know, we're sat here in a university town very, very clearly. I know there is a huge amount of liaison that takes place between the local authority and the university. But, you know, again, this for me is about ongoing dialogue rather than putting in place strict caps on how the market operates.
The woman here in the pink.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about the failure to replace the social housing that was lost in places like St Andrews through the right to buy policy of the 80s. The fact that it hasn't been replaced has led to so many people who are St Andrews born and bred having to move out of the town. I think that's something that should be addressed.
And the woman back there.
I actually agree with the man in the check shirt earlier saying that St Andrews prices are extortionate, because I'm a St Andrews student myself, and this year one of my friends from St Andrews have actually chosen to live in Dundee, where the prices are nearly half what they are in St Andrews.
Màiri?
Yeah, this is a topic that I have a lot of sympathy with. I'm not from this area, but the area I represent in rural Lanarkshire has a lot of the same problems, and I grew up there, and I saw how, as a young person, pretty determined to make my life and career in that area, there are just so many pressures which sometimes can make you just give up and, like the lady up the back, you know, move to elsewhere. It's access to jobs, it's access to services, it's transport reliability and affordability, and it is the availability and affordability of housing. So I'm very much in favour, not only in the you know, regulation, but in community empowerment, to allow communities to decide how best to manage what, you know, the tourism in their area, which in many ways is important.
So what will you actually do about it?
Well,
because housing is devolved, you're in a position to do something about it. What are you going to do?
Absolutely. So we have built 100,000 houses with a percentage for which are affordable. We have launched our Housing to 2040 strategy, which...
But what about a cap on the number of holiday homes and student flats, as the question is asking?
I was going to mention an important part of the Housing to 2040 strategy, which is about empowering councils to bring disused and abandoned properties back into use, because I know, I'm not sure to what extent that would affect you here in St Andrews, but there are a lot of, for example, rural and island properties where young people can't get a house, but there is an abandoned property or a disused piece of land. So I have land reform in my portfolio. We have the Scottish Land Fund, and that's about empowering communities to take control of their assets and decide what they want to do with them.
Emily?
We don't have enough homes in Britain. That's what the problem is. And in order to fix it, it isn't one of these things that can be fixed immediately. And that's why many politicians run away from it, because they don't get they don't see the results sometimes within the term that they are in power. And you need to have a vision which is longer than 3 or 4 years if we're going to do something about this. And we have to start making some hard decisions. We need to build more houses, we need to build more flats. So the next question is, where are we going to build them? Because you will find very often, if there is a planning application for more homes, you will get all the people in the area turning up and saying they don't want it, but the youngsters who might benefit from a flat won't even know that it might be them that might benefit in the future, and you won't see them at the planning meeting saying, actually, I think it's a good idea for us to have more homes in this area. I'd like to move out of my parents' house. I'd like to not have to share with 3 other people in their late 20s. I actually would like to have a chance to have my own family, to be able to live in my own place.
Sure, but how would you resolve that problem?
And so, well, you need to be able to have some vision on it, and you need to be able to have a proper conversation nationally, because there needs to be compromises made. We must have more affordable housing made. I personally, this is not Labour policy, but I personally would put a cap happily on second homes. I think that it's right in certain areas that we need to do that, and we must have priority for affordable homes for people who come from those areas, who serve those areas. In my constituency, the people who serve my area cannot afford to live in my area, and that's completely wrong.
Okay. The man there in the grey shirt. Yes.
I was born in this town and brought up in it, so was my wife. And when we were 21, we got married. That was the end of me being able to live here with my parents. I had to move out 10 miles away. I got back eventually because I built my own house. But most of my children, who have their own families now, live 10 miles away because the same thing has happened to them.
Yeah.
I don't know if many people know the statistics of this town. People like me, there's 7,500 of us. It's 11,000 students. I don't know if the gentleman at the end was aware of that, but that's a shocking statistic. And I don't think you can rewind this. I think it's terrible. I agree about affordable housing, but I felt in 1970 when I got married, I felt very bitter about it because this is my home. Yeah. My roots were pulled up, and my children, who are not children now, have had to do the same. They've now stopped in this town. You cannot have any houses of multiple occupation. That was Fife Council that brought that out, but it took a lot of fighting to get that done. But all the owners of the properties that want nothing against students because it's a big industry, but if you take a house, it's 3 people, you need to have a licence. All you have to do is split it and put 2 couples in there, something like that. We haven't got to the answer. It's heartbreaking.
Should there be a cap on the number of holiday homes and student flats, Stephen?
I think what I would definitely say is we need to build more homes, full stop.
And what about a cap?
That is the problem.
What about a cap? That's the question.
Well, I'm not drawn to the idea of that kind of regulation, frankly. I think I'd rather deal with the root issues. And the root issue is there just aren't enough homes in Scotland, and we need to build more homes generally of all sorts. And that is one of the reasons why at the last Scottish general election, which was last year, the Scottish Conservatives came forward with the most ambitious programme for building houses since devolution, including the most ambitious programme for building social housing, because frankly there are things that we need to do. There are lots of areas for development that are currently being banked by developers, and we need to do something to move that land into productive use through the building of houses. One of the ideas that I think we need to develop is the idea of compulsory sales orders, where you've got pieces of land, properties that are derelict or lying, not being used productively, and something needs to be done about that. I think there are a whole bunch of small measures that we need to take, which added together create a more dynamic market for the building of houses. And then on top of that, we need to make sure that it's possible for people to be able to afford to buy a home. So we need to do much more to help first-time buyers. We need, my wife and I have 4 children, and we have watched them in their struggle to get on the property ladder. We've done everything we can to help them, obviously, but ultimately we need to do more as a society to help young people feel that getting a foot on the property ladder is a realisable dream that they can fulfil. And currently, because of rising prices, because of the non-availability of suitable properties, that is very difficult, and we need to do something about that.
But it's not all about home ownership.
I mean, it's also about social
we're out
housing.
Of time,
it's also social housing as well.
Okay.
That's part of our programme.
I'm going to stop you because our hour is up.
Oh.
There's a few hands up still, forgive me, but we're out of time. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much to our audience here in St Andrews for coming along tonight. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. From Question Time in St Andrews. Bye-bye.